Hi Tabby, Mr. Isaacs here. I'm going to try to help you through these questions you had in a video. So right now, in fact, I'll make things look a little simpler. I'll reduce this back, at least for now, to simple mode. So there's Game Maker, and I am going to help you. I'm going to go through your 5 questions. Number 1 says, pick up objects such as a sword and be able to use them and carry them with you. What you could do, and we'll go into this later if you know what, I'll show you what the heck, we'll do this. Basically, the picking up objects like a sword and then using them will involve having 2 different objects, one which will be your guy with the sword and one which will be your guy without the sword. And what will happen is you'll have to switch back and forth when your guy actually is using the sword and when he's not. What we'll probably do is set up the 2 different objects and something like a timer that when you press a key that's going to allow you to use the sword, you then use the sword, it's timed, and if you hit an enemy while you have the sword, it'll hurt them, and if you retract the sword, or if the sword goes away, then you won't. So you could kind of use it periodically, but that's better than, in other words, holding it the whole time and just walking around stabbing everything in sight. So in that regard, let's just create a sprite. I'm going to actually even create these just real simply. Sprite guy, okay? And I'm going to create my very own exciting sprite here. And he's going to be 32 by 32 is probably fine. And I'm going to edit this, make it the workspace bigger. I just did Control plus a bunch of times. And I'm just going to draw a very simple stick figure guy for our purposes. There he is. Here's his body, his arms, and this will be guy without sword. Okay, so we'll call him. We'll give him a name. Well, we have him as guy, so that's fine. So I'm going to save him and hit OK. Now I'm going to create a new sprite for. And actually, no. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to duplicate this sprite. Oops, I just messed that up. Why did I do that? What did I do? That was silly. I'm going to recreate my sprite. I don't know what happened there. It was such a masterpiece. Okay, so I am going to draw guy. Hope I could do it as good this time. There we go. Arms, legs, and there he is. So this is going to be guy. And I am going to name this sprite guy and hit OK. I'm going to delete this one here. Now I'm going to duplicate this guy, and this one's going to be sprite guy sword. Okay, and I'm going to edit this, and I'm going to double click, and again I'm going to go zoom way in, and this guy is going to be holding a sword. Okay. That looks just like a sword, doesn't it? So there's my guy with sword, okay? And hopefully you'll be able to tell the difference in the game. I think you will. So in other words, one guy does not have a sword, one guy has a sword, okay? Now I'm going to make an object for each one. OBJ guy, and he'll use the guy one, and OBJ guy sword, and he'll use the with sword one. Okay, so now guy I'm going to program to just move around. So I'm going to add an event when you use the keyboard right, he moves. I'm going to use these directions, and the right is 0 and at a speed of, let's say, 4, and I'm going to add another event left, and this one's going to be 180 and a speed of 4. Okay, and for now I'm just going to have him move left and right as if that's enough for our purposes. Okay, now let's make it that you have to press the space bar to switch from guy to guy with sword. So I'm going to add an event which is going to be another, this one's going to be, there are a few ways to do it. I think I'm going to do it as still keyboard when I press the space bar, he's for a certain amount of time going to become guy with sword, like as if he has to lunge and then retract, like he can't just walk with it extended the whole time. So when I hit space bar, we're going to have him change into guy with sword, and yes, he will perform events of guy with sword, meaning he'll change, and now he really does whatever guy with sword is supposed to do. So we'll do that, but now in this event, right now, I'll show you what happens if I create a room. I'm going to call this room sword battle, and I'm going to put in the object. Let's just say for now, all I really want to put in is guy with sword. Oh, no, not guy with sword, I lied. I want to put in just guy. Okay, so here's guy. All right. Now, in my room, when he, in theory at least, when I press the space bar, he changes. So let me show you that much. So here I am, and I pressed it, and he changed. Okay. Now, that's all fine and good, but right now he's guy with sword forever. And another thing I forgot to mention, which we will get to, this video will be a little longer than I thought. The next part will have to be how to determine that he even collected the sword and can use it in the first place. But we'll get to that also, okay? So now, here we go. Okay, so we have the guy now changing. Excuse me if I repeated anything. I had to take a little pause for one of the classes that I was teaching, but now I'm back. So, okay, so now, we also wanted to do something to figure out if we get the sword in the first place, okay? So I'm going to set up something where your guy has to, as regular object guy, has to go pick up the sword. So I'm going to make a very, very fancy sprite for the sword. Watch this. Don't worry, I don't expect you to be quite as artistic as me. And let's see. I'm going to make a sword. Oh. Wow, that's a good sword. Okay, I don't need to save it. I'm going to say okay. Now I've got my sword. Now I should make an object for that sword. OBJ sword. And we'll use my very fancy sword. I'm going to make it solid because I'm going to collide with it. Okay, so there we go. So now, we're going to go back and think about this for a second. So here's our guy. Let's just pretend that the sword is here, and he has to pick it up before he has it. Okay? So, object guy, if he's in, let's say, the first room, or when he's first, not when he's created, let's say, when the room starts, at least in this case. So I'm going to go to other, room start. I'm going to set the variable, and we're going to use it as a variable called, and I'll make it a global variable. It's not a big difference. It's just that if I put global dot in front of a variable name, then that variable can be with us through the whole game, level to level, character to character. So if we ever need to call upon it from somebody else, we know it exists as a global variable. So I'm going to say when the room starts, global dot has sword is going to be equal to 0. He does not have the sword yet. Okay? So then we're going to go, when he collides with the sword, a couple things are going to happen. One is global dot has sword is going to equal 1. And I just realized, I think because of my gap in time, the thing we didn't go over yet was how he has the sword, then loses it, but we'll still do that as well. Okay? I mean, in other words, how he presses the spacebar to use it, and then it retracts. But in theory, he didn't have the sword yet anyway. So we're going to set it that he gets that. Now, another thing has to happen is when he gets the sword should disappear. Now, when I destroy the instance, object guy is the one that I'm programming. So when he collides with the sword, sword is other. So I'm going to set it that other disappears. So so it goes to 1 and it disappears. So now I have the sword. Okay? That brings me back to this. With the space bar, I don't just automatically change into this unless I have the sword. So before that, I'm going to go into my variables and I'm going to test my variable. If variable global dot has sword equals 1, meaning I have it. And whenever that's the case, I want the then to be in a block. So then change instance into object guy with the sword. Okay? So right now things should change a bit for the better. So I'm going to play my game for a second. I'm going to move. Right now, oh, and if I hit spacebar right now, nothing happens. I get the sword. Now it went away. Now I hit spacebar and I have the sword. And my guy with the sword doesn't know how to move yet, but that's okay. So we got that, right? Now for my guy, because it's going to drive me crazy if he does that, I'm going to add at least a keyboard no key. When no key is pressed, I want him to continue in the same direction, because I might want him still at least facing that way, with a speed of 0, so he at least stops. And when he changed into when he changed into object guy with sword, he wasn't programmed to move. So guy with sword should also move to the left. That was, I believe, 180 at a speed of 4. To the right at 0 direction at a speed of 4. And Noki, same direction at a speed of 0. Okay, so far so good. Now what we want to do though, and actually guy, you know what? I'm sorry, I should have done this too. Well, let me think about this. So object guy, when he hits spacebar, this is what happens. But why don't we do this? Why don't we say that he's the guy with the sword at first, right? Now we go to guy with sword, and when he is, let's say, created, anytime he's created, we are going to set a timer that'll determine when he turns back. So let's say it's 50 steps, which is a short amount of time, maybe a half a second, I think. But anyway, in alarm 0. Basically, we're saying when he is guy with the sword, we're setting this alarm. When the alarm goes off, I add an event here, alarm 0. So he's created, it sets the alarm. The alarm goes off, and then we want to change him back to object guy. Now, and perform events, yes. Now he could then use the sword again, but at least it makes it detract for a moment, and then we'll deal with the enemy part. So I'm going to play my game again. I'm going to move. Gonna get my sword. Now I have the sword, and then the sword goes away. Now I'm moving. I still have the sword, so I could hurt something, but then it goes away. So I at least have to be careful with how often I have the sword going, okay? Now, the next thing would just be that if I have an object enemy or a sprite enemy, and we'll just grab something. I think the apple should be our enemy right now. So the sprite enemy, object enemy, and now basically what object enemy needs to have the sprite of the apple. Now let's just say, for argument's sake, we put the apple in the room. I need to be in objects, choose apple. Okay. Now what we want to do is, if the guy with sword collides with the apple, then the apple, let's say, disappears, and maybe we get a point. So this, what's going to destroy is not the guy with sword, but the apple. Now, just for our purposes, if you're dealing with lives and stuff, you can do that. I just want to show you a real quick example of the other way around. If the guy who's not the one with the thing hits the apple, let's say that then it is him that disappears. It would be really lose a life, but I'm just trying to move through this for a second. So then it would be him that dies. So I'm going to put a couple other apples in here. They all have to be beyond the sword at this point for the way that I'm showing the game, because if he doesn't have the sword and he goes into it, he'll just plain die. But I'm going to show you an example. We're going to have him hit one with the sword and one without. Okay? So We start the game. He does not have the sword. He moves over. He gets the sword. He presses. There, I got rid of that because he had the sword. Now I die because I don't have the sword. Okay, I'm going to stop there for now, and I will address your other questions in a little bit, but that should help you for a while. And let's see. And I guess I already addressed number 2. The sword can be used to kill a monster. Number 3, 4, and 5 I'll deal with shortly. Okay? Hope this helps so far.